Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely wild and, frankly, a little chilling. We're diving into an exploration of corporate greed. Using our source material to trace modern scandals all the way back to their roots, we are going to uncover the original architects of global corporate domination and map out exactly how profit-driven motives can spiral into some of the most devastating events in human history.
The source text kicks things off by throwing down a massive, provocative question just to set our baseline. What makes a company truly evil? I mean, how do we even measure the ultimate corporate malfeasance? Is it the sheer number of fatalities, environmental destruction, or is it something deeper, something built directly into the operating model itself? To figure that out, we have to look at how corporate misdeeds actually play out in the real world. So to answer that opening question, the analysis first draws a really critical distinction between two types of modern malfeasance: reckless negligence and intentional deception. On one hand, you have Boeing. To save money and avoid extra pilot training, they hid the existence of their flawed MCAS software. That reckless cost-cutting resulted in two brand-new 737 MAX planes crashing, costing 346 lives. On the other hand, you have Big Tobacco. In 1994, top tobacco CEOs literally stood before Congress and intentionally testified under oath that they believed nicotine wasn't addictive, all while engineering their products with free-based chemicals to make them hit harder. Both are deadly, for sure, but the intent differs drastically.
The source lays out a staggering scale of modern offenses here. We've got Nike's long history of alleged sweatshop labor and worker exploitation. Then there's Nestle, whose aggressive baby formula marketing campaigns in developing nations, areas where water was contaminated, led to an estimated 10 million infant deaths. 10 million. We see Exxon, where internal documents show they knew about global climate impacts back in the 1970s, yet they funded 30 years of climate denial anyway. And DuPont, whose manufacturing of Teflon unleashed PFOA forever chemicals into the environment. Because of that, 99% of people on Earth now have these toxic chemicals in their blood.
And look, it's not just historical physical products, it's modern services too. The source highlights how profit motives drive drastic actions in the healthcare sector, pointing to allegations that United Healthcare has denied up to an astonishing 33% of medical treatment requests. How? Well, by allegedly utilizing an AI tool called NH Predict. It's essentially an auto-clicker of sorts that reportedly rejects patient care with a really high error rate, fighting life-saving treatments on technicalities just to protect the bottom line. The explainer source then escalates. It points out that these companies don't just sell products or deny services. They actively shape society, fuel conflicts, and engineer crises to maintain their financial growth. Take Facebook's algorithm actively rewarding harmful misinformation because, well, fixing it would reduce user engagement. Or Palantir, creating all-seeing AI surveillance platforms used for military targeting and predictive policing. United Fruit literally fomenting civil wars, and Purdue Pharma structurally manufacturing the opioid crisis. These aren't just businesses anymore, they are geopolitical forces.
We see this geopolitical force perfectly illustrated in the United Fruit Company's imperial playbook. When their workers in Latin America went on strike in 1928, demanding simple things like just a 6-day work week, United Fruit didn't negotiate. They labeled the workers communists and successfully lobbied the U.S. government to overthrow Guatemala's leadership. Step 1, buy the land. Step 2, exploit the labor. Step 3, leverage global superpowers to overthrow uncooperative leaders to protect banana profits. That playbook ultimately sparked a 36-year civil war that killed 200,000 people.
And when faced with the immense human cost of these aggressive tactics, the internal corporate response is often chillingly detached. This is captured perfectly by Purdue Pharma's Richard Sackler. When he was presented with early data showing 59 OxyContin overdose deaths, his private email read, "This is not too bad, it could have been far worse." That right there is the sound of human lives being weighed on a balance sheet and written off as an acceptable cost of doing business.
But here is where the source material makes a fascinating pivot. All of these modern examples we've just covered, from Boeing's regulatory capture and United Healthcare's denials to Nike's extreme labor exploitation, they aren't isolated incidents. They are just symptoms of a much, much older disease. To truly understand why companies operate this way today, we have to look at the historical blueprint they inherited. To understand that root cause, the text directs us back to the 1600s spice trade. Back then, spices were the ultimate status symbol. They were literally as valuable as gold. And to control this wealth, the Dutch created the ultimate blueprint for corporate domination in 1602, the Dutch East India Company. By 1621, they had executed the brutal Bandanaise massacre to secure their total monopoly.
Section title: Why the Dutch East India Company Dominated. Let's dive right into how this happened.
According to the source, the secret to their unmatched dominance, why they completely ruled the globe, was a jaw-dropping financial innovation tied directly to military might. The Dutch literally invented the concept of stock. Before this, merchants just acted alone. But the Dutch government brought their top merchants together and pooled public investor money, creating the very machinery of modern capitalism, specifically to fund a massive, militarized corporate conquest of Indonesia. They didn't just invent the stock market, they invented it to fund a private corporate war.
Their strategy for dominance was a brutally efficient three-step process. First, consolidate the merchants so there's zero domestic competition. Second, fund this new megacorporation with public stock, giving them a practically infinite war chest. And third, deploy a massive private military to violently seize the global spice supply. They weren't just out competing local Indonesian farmers, They were literally showing up with warships to take the inventory by force.
This brilliantly illustrates the difference in scale between then and now. The text sharply contrasts this historical reality with modern business. Today, maintaining a monopoly means, what, buying out a competitor? Maybe hiring some consultants for a turbocharged marketing plan or lobbying regulators? But for the Dutch East India Company, maintaining a monopoly literally meant burning rivals' crops to the ground and destroying entire uncooperative villages just to forcefully restrict global supply and keep their prices high.
The source provides a shocking statistic to truly quantify their ruthlessness: 90%. In 1621, to secure their complete monopoly over nutmeg and mace, the Dutch East India Company massacred 90% of the bandana's population. Actually, just let that sink in for a second. They nearly eradicated an entire indigenous population simply because it made the most financial sense for their shareholders back in Europe.
So let's look at how this builds into an entire horrific ecosystem. To run this expanding empire, they enslaved the mere 1,000 survivors of that massacre. Because they needed more labor to run their newly seized spice monopoly, they began importing slave labor globally. They operated with absolute military impunity, eventually conquering Sri Lanka just for its cinnamon and establishing colonies in South Africa. The cost of their market dominance was just a staggering trail of human suffering.
Now, this wildly profitable, albeit incredibly dark, blueprint didn't go unnoticed. The source notes that this model was quickly copied by the British East India Company. They took the Dutch model of militarized capitalism and scaled it up rapidly. They conquered the entirety of India with a private army that eventually grew larger than Britain's actual national army. And when they needed more revenue, they aggressively pushed opium into China, deliberately causing mass addiction entirely for profit.
The source distinguishes these historical megacorporations with one crucial point. Other companies used slave labor, but the East Indias ran their entire empire on it. Their whole structural foundation was built on outright imperialism and slavery. It wasn't just a byproduct of their supply chain like you might see with a modern clothing brand. It was the very core of their business model. They destroyed nations to pay dividends to their stockholders.
As the explainer text concludes, while these specific East India companies were eventually dissolved after centuries of atrocities, the aggressive tactics they pioneered remain the underlying DNA of modern corporations. The blueprint they left behind is unmistakable: complete monopolization of resources, aggressive marketing, prioritizing shareholder returns over absolutely everything else, and ultimately viewing human lives as acceptable collateral. Whether it's denying medical claims with AI, hiding plain defects, or concealing the dangers of forever chemicals, the playbook is exactly the same. Which leaves us with a final provocative thought derived directly from the source material. The original megacorporations are long gone, but the endless pursuit of profit they birthed is very much alive today. If the entire system of modern commerce was built on this ruthless historical blueprint, is humanity destined to keep paying the price? It's a heavy question, for sure, and one we need to keep asking every single time we see a new corporate scandal break. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the systems around you.